Many artists try to get into charcoal drawing, but hang on, is the best way to get into charcoal drawing using a graphite pencil? Find out today.
Welcome to Stationery Test Drive. Today we are going to be looking at the Black Matte 1111 drawing pencil by Faber-Castell. I'm Samir.
This is Minjal.
And I'm Vishal. And as we said in the intro, many of us artists and enthusiasts, which we certainly all three of us are, have been very curious about getting into charcoal pencil and or charcoal sticks or just charcoal as a drawing medium. But as beginners in that particular tool, I think both Samir and me and Minjal, we've figured out that maybe, to get that kind of effect with something simpler, you should start off with these. And Samir, why don't you tell us about the Faber-Castell drawing pencils that are the black matte, quadruple one, four ones, 1111, double one.
Who knows? Faber-Castell, of course, needs no introduction. They're one of the longest running pencil brands in history. They've been around since 1761 in Germany.
They're sort of the big two, them and Staedtler.
Yeah. In fact, I think Staedtler and them are in the same town in Germany.
There is a whole story about that, which I don't quite know. But I know they started at the same time.
So Faber-Castell is the original factory is in Stein in Germany near Nuremberg. Again, hundreds of years old, have been making pencils of various grades and levels for all of that time.
This is a 6B, by the way.
And this particular version is a fairly low cost version that we get here in India. I think Faber-Castell makes several grades of artist pencils. We were quite surprised by the fact that this, relatively inexpensive set was really excellent to use.
Is it literally the equivalent of $1? A US dollar?
Yeah.
Cheaper actually. This is 75 rupees.
Okay, so at the current time of this exchange, and it is about a little less than a US dollar.
Also, when I got the set, I was a little confused about whether this is their newly launched graphite matte or is this like a cheaper version, because the newer version won't be this cheap.
So it comes in 5 grades: HB, which I think we're all familiar with from school, and then all the way up to 10B.
Yeah, and just to cover the confusion about the matte pencils. So very recently, within the last few years, Faber-Castell has introduced a new form of pencil which they claim has a more matte graphite that comes out of it. So one of the problems with graphite, which everyone who tries to take a picture of a pencil drawing faces, is that reflective sheen that you get. In fact, you can look at our older pencil episodes and you can see that the drawings don't quite show up cleanly.
It's almost glossy.
Yeah, there's a glossiness to it, which cameras are really, troubled by.
And studio lights certainly enhance or exacerbate that problem.
So, considering that everyone who's an artist today takes pictures of their work to put on social media and all over the place, Faber-Castell has come up with a matte black pencil which is supposed to be less reflective. Now, the confusion is that those are called the Pitt Graphite matte pencils.
Okay.
And these are called the Faber-Castell black matte pencils. So, you can confuse the two because they both have the word matte in them, but these are just normal.
But I'm glad for
pencils,
I'm glad for the confusion because these turned out to be really good pencils. I'm surprised at having such good quality for such a low price, especially in India. Maybe you get them for more elsewhere, but 75 rupees for 5 of these, you'd be very, very happy with the results. And we were happy with the results, right?
And after having tried the Staedtler Mars Lumograph,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if there is ground for direct comparison, but these just seem much, like Vishal said, it's a nice experience to use these for writing, drawing, shading.
We'll actually come back to comparisons because in our test drive, which is what we do every week, we are artists and calligraphers and designers. we basically take these tools, sometimes inexpensive, sometimes expensive, like even the Staedtlers that we tried were more
more
a bit
expensive
more
than
expensive than this. These are very much a bit premium in India, but certainly well within the reach of most people.
Yeah.
And comparison-wise, I think we all did things that were sort of like what we did in the in the Staedtler episode. I'm sorry, this is going to get really confusing because in my head, Faber-Castell's Staedtler, like they kind of mix. But Minjal, why don't you show us your test drive? I'll keep this aside. Aha. You have gone for calligraphy, but in a handwritten way.
So, pencil calligraphy is a great way to actually, say, maybe learn how to do styles like brush calligraphy. We've used the Tombow, for instance, in the past.
Yeah.
And we have an episode on that. It's not very easy to, learn a new style with, say, maybe a more evolved tool like that. So a lot of lettering artists will actually start pencil calligraphy with pencils. What you do is, now I used the 6B in the set, and you sharpen it, you flatten it out till you get a broad edge.
Okay.
And then you can kind of do pencil calligraphy where you manage to get the thin strokes and thick strokes.
Okay. So you essentially then practice the shapes of the letters with something like a pencil, which is more controllable, I guess.
That's correct.
Before you go on to a brush.
Right.
Pen.
Right.
That's a very good way to start off. And if you want to, speaking of things that you want to move on to pens, we have an episode on the Staedtler pens, right? The calligraphy ones.
Yes,
those were Staedtlers, right? I thought
Yeah. So we have episodes on the Staedtler calligraphy markers, and we also have a episode on the Staedtler
Mars
Lumograph,
and the colors
which
ones.
Minjal also did some calligraphy with. So
and we did the color pencils as well. So like Faber-Castell is actually lagging behind in our test drives. We haven't done. This is the first Faber-Castell one we're doing.
No, we did the kneaded eraser.
Oh, the eraser, yes.
So they will catch up soon.
Which I used a lot of in my test drive, and I was talking about thematic things in sort of doing the same thing over. In our it was like maybe our second or third episode where we did that.
The Lumograph.
And I did sort of an Arabian Nights inspired pencil drawing in that one. So I thought, okay, let me do another Arabian Nights inspired thing for this one. And yeah, I enjoyed it. It's a really fun. It is like you said. It's closer to charcoal. I don't really have much experience in charcoal, but having said that, it's fun to kind of lean into the wedge-like nature, like you said.
Yes.
Because certain wedges had sort of developed, and we've talked about this in other episodes, even all the way to fine points like the mechanical pencil. But yeah, I mostly kept to sort of proper heavy lines this time. As an artist, you kind of try to go for lighter lines, which I did for shading. But finishing off with this nice heavy line that gives you, I think it has more character or as much character as a pen almost approaching a brush. So that range, the fact that I think I mostly stuck to 2 or 3 pencils. I don't think I ended up using like, obviously for like deep blacks, I used, here's the fun thing I think both of us noticed. The 8B seems to go down darker or easier, at least on certain papers, than the 10B.
And I think, we will come back to talking about the whole range of pencils.
Yes, later. But yeah, very fun to use, very quick to use, though I was surprised at how quickly these went down and put down a tone that I liked, where I didn't have to do repeated, finessing and all that. Obviously, it can be a bit sharper, but I'm trying to kind of loosen up with some of these and be more like certain mid-century illustrators that I admire. Like Austin Briggs or Mitchell Hooks. Clearly nowhere near that level, but it's fun to just loosen up with these, and I think that's the fun of cheapish stationery like this. You can loosen up and you don't have to care, and you can sharpen one or just keep one blunt, and it doesn't matter. And these are very tough. I did not have any single breakages or anything like that, even on the softer leads, and I was not being kind to them or subtle with them. Samir, what did you end up with? something much more subtle than mine, that's for sure.
I think I also kind of did a similar piece to what I did for the Staedtler Mars Lumograph, in that this is figurative as well. So yeah, this was just like the Staedtler. I stuck to the human figure, although this is more of a portrait, and I think very similar to what Vishal noticed. I just really like the texture of these pencils.
Yeah, we're using a sort of a rough-ish cartridge paper. It's not very rough at all. So we specifically use that so that the texture of the tool itself shows up sometime. And this one shows up, I think, a bit more than the other one, than the Staedtler, let's say.
I think if we have to compare the Staedtler and the Faber-Castell, because they're similar sets of artist pencils, and both of them are kind of not the super expert artist pencils. They're kind of the beginners artist pencils. The Staedtlers are great at producing an even, smooth tone.
Yeah, I got some. I'm sure I've either put up a picture of this already on the screen or maybe now.
With the Faber-Castells, I found that the texture was just so pleasing that I didn't want to smoothen it out.
Yeah,
I wanted it to remain in this kind of rough.
I really enjoy this graphic shadow shape that you got, which has several levels of shadow in it.
Yeah.
But somehow shows up as almost like a computer-made graphic shape.
Yeah, the thing I found about the Faber-Castell, and that shape is actually a good measure of that, is that you just can do a lot more without drawing lines. As much as Vishal lent into drawing the lines, I don't think this shape of her entire sort of torso and neck would have worked with something like the Staedtlers without a line. Whereas here it just forms this very pleasing textured line, and that sort of a shape rather.
In the old days, you'd get screen tones and grey tones that you could like decal onto, especially people would use it in comic art and all. This is almost like that in terms of evenness, but it has more character.
Yeah, and I think that's, we started off saying that these pencils are great for people who would like to try out something like a charcoal pencil. For those who haven't tried it out, charcoal is a beautiful medium. It's literally a stick of charcoal, and sure, you get them in the form of pencils.
They've been compressed
into a wood cylinder. Those are easier to use, but the point is that the charcoal medium is always messy. There's just no way around it. It's so fine and so powdery once it actually goes down on the surface that it gets everywhere. Like, there is no way to do charcoal artwork and be neat and clean about it. You're going to have it all over your clothes, all over your fingers. It's a mess. Very worth it once you get into it to a certain level. But I think that these pencils were a great in-between. Like, they have the convenience of a graphite pencil, but they kind of give you that experience of having that very textured, almost organic look that charcoal gives you on paper. So I would definitely say that if you are interested in charcoal, try something like this out first.
Yeah, and if you enjoy it, then absolutely move on to charcoal. But do get one of these on the way, because just the range of things you can get from this. You can get totally artistic but graphic. You can get extremely controlled calligraphy, and you can just doodle around and get things like that. You can take your doodles further than you would with just a regular pen.
Now, the one thing I've always wondered is, does anyone use the HB pencil at all?
I did. I use the HB pencil for what is known as, I guess, block-in or the sketch stage of things, where you just lightly put it in, and then I used a Faber-Castell kneaded eraser to knock it back, like we've talked about before. And then I proceeded with the 4B, the 6, the 8.
I was also telling Sameer that we've recorded 42 episodes. I think in almost 40 episodes now I've used the Natraj 621 Plasto eraser for all my work.
Yes, the Plasto and now the Faber-Castell, I'm realizing, the kneadable eraser, are both extremely versatile in anything you do, because most of the time we are putting down a test or a block-in or a sketch of some kind, an underdrawing, what they call that. There's Faber-Castell and Staedtler are wonderful, and we have found a perfect companion to the little suitcase of kneaded erasers and the Natraj that you can buy a whole box of for less than the price of these pencils. But this box of pencils, They're also very handsome, I must say. I know we talk about this once in a while, but Minjal, you have thoughts on its handsomeness?
Not on the handsomeness, but I read that Faber-Castell actually is one of the few stationery companies that actually, allows tours of its production facilities. So you can actually visit the Faber-Castell castle. There are guided tours. There is, a wooden pencil making facility that you can visit. Guided tours again. And not all stationery factories are very open to the prospect. I'm
That's
guessing
true.
there are patents and copyrights, so they don't encourage visitors. But, if you're in Germany, please, let us know if you've actually visited the factories.
And I think we can include a link in our description for article on our site which displays videos of the Faber-Castell factory and other stationery factories. And on a side note, Minjal mentioned that they have like workshops showing you the wood making of the pencil. That's partly to do with the history of Faber-Castell, because the Faber family that started Faber-Castell were cabinet makers.
Okay. So from large pieces of wood to very minute and precise ones.
Right. And the one thing that we said we'd cover later, and we should get to that, is if we have any sort of, I wouldn't call it a negative comment, but a more detailed comment about these pencils, we have to cover the range of this set. So it has 6 drawing pencils from HB to 10B. And I think the thing that both Vishal and me, and I think even Minjal found, is that from HB to 8B, the gradation kind of makes sense. It gets darker and darker with each grade. At 10B, something changes.
Yeah.
So I ended up not using the 10B much because it's technically supposed to be the darkest pencil. But to get it to be as the darkest pencil, it requires a lot more pressure than the others.
Right.
So it's a very different experience than the others, and therefore I kind of left it out
I don't
for the
think
most part.
I don't think I bothered with too much 10B either. I just used it to fill in some things, but I didn't bother to make it so dark.
My theory is that as gradations of pencils get darker, they are actually including less clay and more graphite, which means that they get softer and softer and easier to break. I'm guessing Faber-Castell got to the 8B and they were fine with how much pressure it required. But at 10B, it was just too brittle and they had to change the formula for it. And maybe they're aware of this because I don't know if it shows on camera, but the colors of these grades on this box are different for all of these and different for the 10B. It's a gray versus a black.
Yeah.
So maybe it's something that they have very specifically made that way, but it's something you should be aware of. The 10B can be the darkest pencil if you put in a lot of pressure, but it doesn't behave exactly like the other pencils.
It's not a linear curve of pressure that you're used to, or the same pressure. There is an uptick that you need to do at the end. And that's a nuanced thing. It's not a bad thing, I think.
No, it's just something you need to be aware of when you're working with it.
One more thing that you need to be aware of is that we are Inky Memo. We have stationery stories and transcripts even of these episodes on our website, and other things as well. Many wonderful things. Follow us on social media for those. Follow each of us at the links on the screen right now. And we will see you every week for more test drives. But before we go,
if you like this video and of course are a fan of artist pencils, you really should watch the video that we've been talking about, which is the one on the Staedtler Mars Lumograph. And also the Faber-Castell kneaded eraser, which we have covered before.
Right.
Those would be the next best thing to watch after this one. Vishal?
Always bet on matte.